Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. I know that this episode is a little bit late. Probably should have come out a couple days ago, if not a few weeks ago, and I do apologize for that. Everything has just been very busy at the start of the new year, to be perfectly honest with you. So I appreciate you bearing with me as we get the second half end of the year recap out to you here. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, we already went and recapped some of the best moments from the first half of the year in 2023. In the previous episode, make sure that you go check that out on YouTube or wherever you stream your podcast. Some amazing stories from people like Megan Kavanaugh. You hear about Danilo Rajan. You hear about my experience of going over to Australia. Hear from Mike Lansing, Jared Odenbeck, just some really awesome people I was able to speak to and also be able to share my story a little bit. So this is going to be for the second half of the year to hear about how my season went in Australia, the back half of it. You will hear from people like Rashida Beale, from Samantha Rosette, Addison Steiner, Victor Davis, Solomon Constant. Who am I forgetting? Liang pops on the podcast again. And as I mentioned, you also hear about what I went through down under. So make sure you check this episode out. If anything catches your eye or catches your ear, go back, and all those episodes are available wherever you stream your podcast or on YouTube, and go and check out the full episode if you like somebody's story or you want to hear a bit more of it. And then I'll update you quickly before we go into the rest of the show. So this will be our first episode of the new year, and then I am going to take a break from content for a little while. I'm expecting, a couple of weeks, but I'll keep everybody updated as that process unfolds. I do want to make content again, but I just want to kind of take a step back, focus on some other things, get some of my other ducks in a row, and then come back to it with a fresher perspective, be able to record some so that we can, not really be missing any weeks or be pretty consistent with it when we roll out again for 2024. 2023 was amazing, but we definitely, especially the back half of the year, we hit the ground running pretty hard, and I don't think we missed an episode a week, until we got to the end of the year there around the holiday time. So that is the plan. Lots of ideas that I have cooking for 2024. So excited to share some of those with you, and excited to have some, new fresh faces on the podcast for you to enjoy in 2024. I'm also thinking about some other ideas as well. One thing I wanted to pose out there to the listeners and the viewers, I get a lot of people that reach out to me kind of seeking advice regarding how to go and play somewhere, how to take the next step in the professional level, and, just kind of questions about professional soccer in general, and really how to do a path similar to what I did. I love having those conversations. I'm happy to do that, but I'm kind of thinking, is that something that if there's enough interest, whether we set up sort of like advisory calls or, because now at this point in my career, I've been able to do some cool things, being able to connect with some cool people, not to mention have, over 100 guests on the podcast. And there's a wealth of knowledge that I've learned from all of them, not to mention other conversations that I've even had off air. So I think there's a lot that I could be able to share with people out there. So if that's something that's of interest, definitely let me know, whether it's advising kind of on the career path, or whether it's kind of the mental health side of the game, or networking, or really anything. Kind of when it comes to that realm, I feel like I'm pretty well versed, so I could help some players out there. Follow the Instagram page, shoot me a message there, or email me, or, get in touch on a YouTube comment, whatever you would like to do. If you're interested in something like that, I'd definitely be curious to see what kind of results we could get doing something like that. So that's something I'm kicking around for 2024. All right, that's about it. I appreciate all of you so much for 2023, and appreciate you sticking with me into 2024. Make sure that you do all of the things, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, follow the socials, all of those things. Please, please, please. It helps the channel grow tremendously. We've already grown so much in 23. I want to see that continue to skyrocket in 2024. Without further ado, here is the end of the year 2023.
up. I was just coming back, like whatever. And then my meniscus repair, one of them failed. So like they at that first
Oh,
surgery, they had like, replaced my ACL and then they had repaired both my meniscus and with like 8 stitches and 5 stitches, which is a lot for meniscus. Normally it's like 2 or 3. So there was a lot going on. And one of the repairs just didn't work. Like it just didn't hold.
mhm.
And that's like kind of annoyingly common with meniscus because the blood flow is so poor and the surgeon has to make a decision whether they think that it can heal or not. And so, whenever possible, they want to repair it. Like that's better long term, but it just doesn't work out like 30% of the time. And I'm like, that's kind of a lot. Okay. So my meniscus repair
Yeah.
failed literally the week before I was supposed to leave for the summer team. So I ended up still going because like the time it can take to come back from those is like really wildly varies. Like some people come back in 4 weeks, other times it's like 3 months. But the thing is, I had just come back from like huge surgery. So like going in again, it really just shut my quad down. Like my knee was very unhappy, like swelling wise. And so I was there just whatever, doing my rehab there and like seeing if there was any way I could get back for any part of the season and like supporting the team and stuff. But that was really hard. And I couldn't make it back. Like, I mean, those seasons are quite short and like I just couldn't
Mhm.
get back in that time. And which also meant that I basically missed the like summer transfer window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that took me about 3 months to be like 100%. So like between like 8 to 10 weeks, I was like starting to work back, but it was about 12 weeks, 3 months before I was like, okay, I'm like back now. And so that was immediately after going through the basically year-long recovery. Then I had that other surgery, another 3 months, all that. Then I'm like, at this time, I'm not working with an agent. I'm just like trying to message teams on my own. And I got in contact with like an American coach who was coaching a team in Portugal. And so like that was looking like it
Mhm.
was going to work out. Like they literally sent me a contract. I signed it, all the stuff. And then it was everything. And then they're like, okay, he's like, I'm just waiting for them to get your flight. And then like it keeps going on and on and on. And they're never getting the flight. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we can't like, basically we can't afford it now. So like maybe we'll talk in January. And I was like, well, no, I'm not talking to you in January now after this. And so again, because of that, now I was screwed out of the like window still.
The
And
window.
the only
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
open was like Israel, and I was trying there. And I had a team that was really interested, and they're like, we can't afford it, like to bring you or whatever. And so then I'm like, still home and still training and coaching and working and doing whatever. And then I started working with an agent because teams was reaching out to were like, oh, we only work with this agent. We only work with this agent, like different agents, but one of them reached out to me. So I ended up working with him for a while. And so then in the beginning of February 2020 is when I got the option in Germany. And so finally I had a contract, whatever. I go there. It's like fairly normal for like a month. And then like COVID happened. So
You've had experience as an assistant coach at a couple different levels. You've also been a head coach yourself. What are obviously maybe a silly question, but to ask just what the differences between assistant and head coach are. But I guess maybe to dive deeper into it, like what makes a really good assistant coach, or what makes a assistant coach that's going to add a lot of value to a coaching staff or to a program.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The main difference between being an assistant and being a head coach, and I'll keep it as simple as this, is as an assistant, you make suggestions. As a head coach, you make decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I think the one good part about where I'm at now is I've had the experience of being a head coach, and I was again head coach for 6 years. So I know being in the hot seat is not an easy thing because you're having to fulfill your vision. You're trying to manage tons of people to accomplish a goal or a task, right? And you have to do it with, again, a little bit of pressure, And so being now assistant these past 2 years after being head coach, I feel like I have a little bit more perspective in how to maybe best help the coach, in terms of fulfilling his vision. But at the end of the day, I think being an assistant, your job is to fulfill the vision of the head coach, and then to be able to hopefully, through your strengths, be able to complement and be able to help where you can, right? And that can look different in different ways. I've been very fortunate. I've gotten to coach at all three divisions. I've pretty much done every job possible under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's given me a lot of perspective with trying to be a best of an assistant as I possibly can to meet the head coach's needs, right? And again, I think it's important to, important qualities as an assistant. First and foremost, loyalty and honesty. You have to be trustworthy. This is a people business, and as a head coach, right? We talked about you're already having to manage 25, 30, maybe even more. Again, young men that are growing and maturing. So you need to also be able to trust the people you work with. That's huge. You want guys that I think are going to give you different perspectives. So one important part is to always have the same common message and same common idea once you step out of the office. But I think it's okay to, again, if a head coach asks you for your opinion, to give him your honest opinion, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you may have a different perspective, whether it be something tactically, something in regards to training or recruit. And again, I think having different perspectives and different ways of looking at things will ultimately shape your program to be a little more open-minded and be successful. But again, I always just say most important things: trustworthy, loyalty, being open-minded, right? Going in with humility, and understanding the coach's vision, and just being bought into what that's about, and being able to help them as best as possible.
And I was going to sleep like at 3 or 4 a.m. when I had training the next day, but it was like at 6 p.m.
Mm.
So I was like, wouldn't it's not gonna matter. Like I'm gonna sleep like 12 hours or like not even 12 hours, like 8 hours. I'm gonna wake up like at 1 or 12 p.m. I'll be good. I'll be solid. But no,
Yeah.
those things caught up to me and dude, like literally, like I went from like being the fastest to like having to like catch my breath like sometimes and stuff like that. And I never really had that until I got benched because I started like every game until like the 10th game. Until I got benched, like that's when like it hit me. And it was too late just because like there was other people on the team that were doing relatively better than me like on the pitch and on training sessions and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's like one thing where I'm like, yeah, I went wrong.
Yeah, but I mean, like, listen, I can, again, like, that's why I say it's important to have people like that go through the same things to like be able to relate to that. Cause like I can relate to that 100%. Like, um, that was a lot of my what my experience was in Denmark. Like in the beginning, I felt like I came in and like I was flying. I was like, I'm finally back in Europe. Like this is awesome. Like I'm playing well. Like cool. Like let's do it. And then as time goes on, especially at that point, it was like early 21, so it was like still in like the height of the pandemic. And I know I've like talked about this a ton on this show, so people are probably sick of it, but whatever. But it was just like bro, like I had nothing to do. Like the only thing that I had was like football training, and yeah, we trained 3-4 times a week, and then we had matches on the weekends and stuff. But like at the end of the day, like as much as we love this, I think we've both realized that like you have to have more to life than just than just football. Like it's not enough, unfortunately, to like sustain you. You have to have social interactions. You have to have other things. You have to have other hobbies, interests, like to make a complete life. So I remember speaking to you about like during that time as well when you were in Germany. I remember how tough it was for you to, like you said, like kind of small German village. You don't have quite that same like social network, those connections outside of the game. Like, and then it's hard. It's hard when you're not your full self to then bring your best self into what you want to do, into your job. Like, it's never easy to perform, especially at the highest levels of sport like that. It's tough to be able to compete and give your best when you're not feeling your best all around. So I started to kind of maybe buy into what he was saying. But anyway, we go into the last game of the season, right? We go into the last week, and the team that we're playing has nothing to play for. They can't climb in the ladder at all. So there's part of us that's also hoping like that they're just kind of lie down. And again, if the team below us loses, which they're playing against a good opponent who did have something to play for, they could climb a space in the ladder. We are safe. We go up 3-0 in the first half. Again, this is where I say, like, I feel like there was just like a curse or something at play. We go up 3-0 in the first half. At halftime, we're more or less like, damn, we're smooth sailing in here. We get to go into the off season. We get to relax. Like, this is end of August. The other team comes out in the second half and scores 4 unanswered goals. We lose 4-3. The team that was below us at the start of the day wins 2-1. We were 45 minutes away from our season being over, us being safe. And safe without having to go to the relegation playoff. Like, it was I've never felt like that before my whole life, and it was demoralizing. It was a devastating day, and you just, like, you don't want to go into the club afterwards. You just want to get as far away as you possibly can and not have to look anyone in the eye because it sucks. But with that result, it then meant that we had to go into the relegation playoff.
Yeah, a big part of playing professionally for me was also being able to travel and explore more of the world. And that didn't take away the draft from me, so to say. I was still going to put my name in the draft and I was still going to go through the process. My contract with Sweden just came before that. And when I was talking to my like mentors and trainers and things like that, on whether I should sign the contract or not, like there's like a chance I could have negotiated and said, can we wait till after the draft? But then at the same time, that would also decrease the ability for me to maintain that contract, especially with them considering me a gamble. So he gave me about a week, I think, to make a decision. And after that, I had just decided that I thought that that was the best opportunity for me. And some of the cons of going into the NWSL right off the bat is it's great to get drafted. It's a really good accomplishment or milestone in playing professionally, but it doesn't guarantee you a contract. So there's a lot of insecurity within that. Even though you do get drafted, you are given a really great opportunity to be able to get into the environment and prove yourself. But this opportunity for me in Europe, I had a contract. Like I had a year to basically figure it out and be able to prove myself versus having 3 months of not getting paid at all to play and try to like prove yourself and move into a brand new place and just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, but also without getting paid. That's like a really hard thing to do unless you have the financial support of family, or because you're not going to want to work a job while doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just a lot more security. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about European football in general for women. And I think a lot of that has been highlighted in the previous World Cup of how much it's developing and how quickly it's developing. And so even with that, like when I came in, I thought that the level was going to be lower than the NWSL level was. Honestly, I didn't even know, I didn't have the true comparison until I went to play in the NWSL this summer. And I think that both levels are very high. I just think they offer different type of value in terms of the style of play and things like that. And your strengths and weaknesses, I think, can compete in both ways. But Yeah, I think more people should kind of look to play in Europe. There's a lot more opportunities, and the level is not like we kind of think it is based on just viewing it. It's actually a lot better and a lot higher than we expect.
Yeah, so the first team that I was on in Sweden, it was in the second division, and I had no idea what to expect really. I mean, coming from the US in the top league with the best players, I mean, I can only imagine it not being as competitive or intense, and that's exactly what it was. It was a great balance between soccer and normal life. Like most of the other girls had other jobs, and soccer
Hmm.
was just something that they loved to do and a hobby. Um,
Yeah.
but I think when women or really anyone start out professionally, they start out on a team to gain experience and get noticed from other teams in the country or really wherever you are in different leagues. Build your
Yeah.
resume, and so I was only there for half of a season, and then the following season I got picked up by a different team and then ultimately moved to the top division in Sweden. So it progressively got more intense and more serious. But I think overall, the league in Sweden compared to what I experienced in Seattle, there was a lot more balance, if
Mm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really important point that you make, that a lot of people, for their first contract, it's probably going to be a little bit lower than you expected because you just kind of have to get your foot in the door somewhere. But then take
Hmm.
advantage of the opportunity like you did. And if you do well enough, especially in places like Europe, you just feel like there's kind of always eyes on you, and there's always that opportunity to take a step up or, play with a new club and things like that. So was
Hmm.
your um, first season with the new club, I believe it's Orebro. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that is. But no, I played for a different team before that called
Ah, okay,
Ostersunds DFF, if I'm
gotcha.
pronouncing that correctly.
And was Orebro the team where you like won the league and then got them promoted to the top division?
Yes, yes. Yep.
What was what's that experience like to go through a season and win the league and win promotion and with a team overseas?
Yeah, I it was so exciting for me because in all of my years playing soccer, I had never really won a championship before. Besides like club younger days winning state cup and stuff, but in my adult career winning winning the league, it felt amazing. I mean, everyone was so excited, and I felt really proud of just looking back of my whole career. That was really exciting moment for me. And plus the girls, it was just a fun team. I loved the coaches. It was a great atmosphere. I felt so comfortable there and like I could be myself. And so overall it was definitely a highlight of my career.
Honestly, the first few I went to, I was just like, I was looking at the center backs, I was looking at defensive mids, and I was just like, I'm way bigger than every defensive mid that is coming here on trial,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm much slower than all of the defensive mids that are coming here on trial. Like not mobile enough, I guess per se. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to switch my position to center back. So I basically just said, forget it. I'm going to be a center back now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to really excel at that through all the trials. And then eventually I even went on trial at Chattanooga for 6 months before they, actually signed me to a professional contract. So
Wow.
yeah, observing the guys that I was going against on trial at all those, trials, I was just like, maybe defensive mids, not not my spot. And that's
Yeah.
the one thing I feel like a lot of players, they don't want to go out of that position that they think they're really good at just to make it to, to be a professional. They want to stick to that position, and then sometimes they just get left behind because they weren't as good, or they could have been in a different position.
Yeah.
So I think if you have to switch positions, you switch positions if you really, really want to be pro.
Yeah, 100%. But man, you said 6 months on trial. Like, what is that? I guess talk to me a little bit about the way the situation in Chattanooga goes down, because I've heard stories of other players, being on trial for months at a time, and it's kind of like, you're going in, you're speaking to the coach, you're like, all right, what's going on? Like, are we doing this? Are we not doing this? Like, what's the situation? Like, I have to imagine that was stressful for you at certain times, being on trial for so long and in limbo.
I mean, yeah. So basically, it started. I went on trial like a winter combine with them, and they basically pulled me aside, and I had a friend there too. He played at ETSU with me, and he was already signed, and he was putting a good word in for me. But I went to the combine, and they pulled me aside and said, "Look, we have three." And this is a first year pro team, so
Hmm.
financially they're not going to just throw out money. So they basically said, "Look, we have three contracts, worth $400 a month plus housing."
Hmm.
And I was like, they asked me if I wanted to do it, if I wanted to come in on a preseason trial and compete for it against like 12 other guys, and I was like, why not? Let's do it. And I went there in February, trained with them from February to about that 6 months, probably like July or August, something like that. And then finally, they took me aside and signed me. But the process during it, man, I was Ubering, to make money,
Mm.
DoorDash. I was doing all that because at the moment I still wasn't getting paid, so I had to do something to make money for, because obviously I was 22, 23.
Yeah.
Bills started kicking in.
Yeah.
Bills, I had to eat, so I had to do something. So I started Ubering, Door Dashing. I lived on a couch for a while. I mean, that's just the way preseason stuff goes.
Yeah.
Um, Not preseason, trials go. So yeah, I mean, it was tough at times. I would always be told I was doing really good. And eventually they did sign me, but it's a long process, and I don't know if a lot of people would want to go through that kind of stuff, but I did it, and I'm here now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a PhD in sports psychology, obviously, so speaking to it at a super high level might be difficult, but I run into it constantly, right? Because a lot of the athletes I work with have worked in it and tried it and done stuff, and some of them even will work with me and a sports psychologist at the same point, at the same time, because they find, well, this person's sports psychology is much more performance based,
Hmm.
right? Of course, I want my athletes to perform well, and I am hoping, I'm cheering for them, but that's not my focus. My focus is I mean, well, I shouldn't say it's not my focus. It's a measurement tool, right? But the process for most sports psychology is a behavioral process that remains within the ego. The ego, as the thinking mind, is an operating system that is constantly functioning, right? It's constantly functioning. And for most people, it's kind of their primary operating system. And the goal with most sports psychology is to retrain or reprogram the ego. The ego tends to be, that's the thought in your brain that say you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And so the idea essentially is through different techniques is to retrain that. I'm good enough. I'm good enough. I'm good enough. I'm better. I can do this. And to be able to consciously retrain that actual thought process in the mind. That's essentially what sums up what sports psychology is. And then be able to, in real time, program the body to listen to that new belief system. But the problem is that I've identified is it's not deep enough, because what's driving most of that I'm not good enough thought process is trauma. And trauma doesn't live in the mind, it lives in the body. The mind interprets it. That's all it is. The ego interprets it. I don't think sports psychology is deep enough, and most people don't. I mean, I live in Seattle, and the Sounders have a sports psychologist they work with, and I've got clients that are in the system there, and they'll go work with him, and then they come to me going, well, "This is insane, really?" And I'm going, "Yeah, I know." And it's not that he's bad or anything like that. It's just they're going, "This isn't helping me." I mean, literally, one of the guys was like, he's like, "Well, I did some work with their psychologist." I go, "Well, how's that going? Is it helping you?" He goes, "He told me I shouldn't think about soccer. Just don't think about soccer, and then you'll be good." I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah,
How's
not
that
helping."
working out for you?
Yeah, how's that working out? It's not helping. He's like, "No, it's idiotic." And it's not that there isn't some value, but the thing is, the problem is is that kind of skill set, what he's saying, because what he's essentially saying is let your mind rest on other things, or not, or completely let the mind go. And I understand that. Be in the body, not in the mind, right?
Yeah.
That's essentially what he's trying to tell them. But the problem is that unless the trauma work is done, you can't understand that. Unless you're doing that because the mind kicks in. If you have no awareness of it as a separate thing, it's going to kick in and interpret what's going on in the body. So I have no awareness of the body, and I can't control the mind, even though you're telling me to control it. I can't, because you're not aware of why it's doing what it's doing. And so it's not a deep enough thing. I mean, I was at a think tank. It's like an MLS think tank situation where a bunch of guys, they just threw a bunch of us in a room to talk about issues around depression and anxiety for former players and stuff like that. And one of the guys in there, who was a PhD in sports psychology, I was talking about, hey, we need to help these guys when it comes to getting healthy as people in their psycho-spiritual way of being healthy. That will help things. And we were talking about current players at the time. And this guy with the PhD, he literally said, and I quote, "If you get them healthy, they will lose their edge. You've got to keep them zombies at some level." That's what he said. And the problem isn't with like the insanity of what he's saying. The problem is that that's actually a baseline. Like, that's their thinking. It's an archaic, like, primitive way of thinking about human beings and athletes. Yeah. It's a slave mentality, to be honest with you. Like, it's a slave mentality. We keep them, kind of docile and subdued so that they will be these angry animals that will run faster. And that's insane, man. That's insane. Where the truth is, you get somebody to the point where they're completely embodied, like they're totally embodied, and the truth comes home to them that there is absolutely nothing here to lose. There isn't, because there isn't. No matter what the fans do, no matter what happens in the game, no matter what, there's zero to lose. This is a process that you're in, and win or lose, there's a gift that is going to be given to you. And once they know that, head to toe in their bodies, can't be shaken, no matter what. I mean, I went down a couple weeks ago to Miami to watch the U.S. Open Cup final. I had a client playing in that. Mm-hmm. And he got man of the match, played really, really well. They won the championship. Houston won the championship. And he asked me afterwards, he's like, "I'm curious, like, how is that for you?" Because he's thinking, asked me, "How's that for your ego?" Because, like, for, my ego, when I see one of my athletes do that, I'm just like, this feels pretty good. I said, to be honest with you, I said, I've dealt with that, years ago, when players that I was working with started having success. I had to work through that process, to get my ego subdued in that way. So I said, to be honest, I don't really care if you win or lose. If you fail or succeed, I said, I'm happy for you. Trust me, I'm celebrating. I'm happy for you. But I'm pretty neutral, because either way, my job remains the same, to use the gift, whatever is being given, because losing and failure gives us a gift as well.
There are players that are making a lot of money to play down there. And there are players who are making more money than professionals in other countries. And I'm just going to say that full stop. Like, whether you want to consider it professional or semi-professional or whatever, that's not really the argument that I'm going to have right now. However, I will, consider or urge those of you who may base your definition of professional versus semi-professional solely from a, monetary point, like how much money players make. I'm telling you, there's players in Australia who make more than professionals in other countries. For example, if we use the USA, I know what some guys make in NISA, and this is going to vary from club to club and player to player and all that type of stuff, but I know what some of those contracts are, and I'm telling you right now, There are guys in Australia who make more, if not a lot more, than what quote unquote full-time professional players are making. And this is even true in some European countries as well. Now, again, there's always a trade-off, right? If you find yourself in Europe and you're a full-time professional, yes, you might be making less money, but hey, you're in Europe and now you have access to higher levels and making a name for yourself and building your career kind of roadmap out that way. But just something to think about. I know myself, I personally was making more than players that I know who were on lower level European leagues. So kind of like Oberliga and down below, like Germany, so fifth division and lower than that. Like I know that I was making more than certain players at that level. Players can be making really anywhere from all the way at the bottom end, like 50, $75 a game, all the way up to 1,000 plus a game. And that varies a lot from club to club based on how much backing they have. If you go to some of the eastern states, Melbourne and Sydney, and you go near the top level, you've got guys who are making 700, 800 and up a game. And some of that is going to be tied to your performance. So are you starting? Are you in the 18 or are you left off? And a lot of clubs will base it on you're only getting paid if you're in the 18. And then there's a lot of bonus structures that are, that incentivize players within their contract. So, winning points, bonuses, scoring goals for bonus, assists, clean sheets, things like that. Even sometimes like how many minutes you play. Tied into that, though, I think the important part to know is that oftentimes just the money is higher than it is in other places. Like I said, you can full stop right there. However, if you add on to that, I know of players who also had their housing covered, who also were provided coaching opportunities, players who were provided with a car. So when you look at kind of like the full compensation package, a lot of times it's going to be higher than what you can get elsewhere. Like there's even players I've known who have gotten flights over paid for. And again, all of this is going to depend on, what the club can offer and also, what level you're on. But if you look at all that, again, it makes Australia a really attractive place to consider and think about coming to. To go and actually get that experience and actually play.
It was definitely disappointment and just nervousness. I had never been to Europe. I obviously didn't know Swedish. It was in this small town in Sweden too, where I was like, okay, are people even going to speak English that well? But I had to take that moment to like also be sad for the fact that I was like, I came here, I wanted to be that NWSL player, but I'm not ready.
Yeah.
So I took that moment to be sad about that, but I was like, but this is my opportunity to, if I do want to be that player, I think this is the next step that I have to take. So it took a little bit of time for my mindset to shift to the more positive side. But once I got there and once I started playing again, I was like, I already knew it was the right move. I was like, I could have spent another 4 months just training and hoping to get better, but not getting that game time versus going here, putting myself in a bit of an uncomfortable situation for 3 months.
Yeah.
To be able to start to feel it again and just enjoy the game again too.
Yeah. I'm not even going to try and disrespect the Swedish people by saying it. So I'm just going to go with the abbreviation that you had mentioned of KIK.
Yeah, that's
And I wonder if like for you going into it with like that 3 months of almost kind of just like a trial run, right? Kind of seeing, all right, this isn't necessarily a full 8, 9, 10-month season, but did that make it seem a little bit more palatable kind of going over and still having the excitement, but knowing if it doesn't pan out, all right, I can transition a little easier.
Absolutely. I felt like 3 months was the perfect amount of time that I wouldn't feel like I was too far away from home for too long.
Yes.
And at the time, I think we were focused on not getting relegated. So like every game was pretty important. So I felt like I didn't even really necessarily have as much time to think about the fact that I'm so far from home, this, that. I was just like, you need to win games.
Yeah.
You need to help them.
Yeah.
I thought I encourage a lot of players who are in this similar NWSL situation that you're not playing much, like go abroad to Sweden for the second half of the season for 3 months, go get some playing time, see if you like it. Because I mean, I left and I haven't come back to the NWSL because I am enjoying playing abroad so much. So I think it's just such a good option to gain your confidence, put you in a new environment, learn something new. You might love it. Great, stay. You might hate it. Fine, go back. But you gain something from it.
Like, are there any things that you know now that you wish you kind of knew when you first ventured over to Finland for the first time?
Oh, I guess in a way, like I wish I'd taken more agency. I guess I think my problem was, or maybe some other people feel this too, is like you kind of hope these things will fall into your lap. Like maybe these playing opportunities, like if you're doing great, like at the time, like I thought I was doing pretty well. I was like, okay, maybe some will kind of work. Maybe like Man United gives me a shout or something. But I wish I guess be kind of a little more proactive, I guess, in that sense, because like when my season was wrapping up for like the relegation season, I was already having some visa scares at the time too, as well, where it's like getting to totally leave the country, and I wish I'd been a little more proactive in like setting up something when I could try and return and maybe find like opportunities. But too, another problem is when you're what was it when you're an American, it's trial opportunities in Europe can get pretty expensive if you got to fly all the way over there, and then they don't take you. So that's always a bit of a worry too.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe a little bit more proactive in that sense. I wish I'd been a little quicker in trying to learn the culture as well. Like I didn't really like it's almost a little sad. Not sad, but like I didn't really make an attempt to try and learn the language a bit until like my third time there. Sadly, my shortest as well. So yeah, I think as an American, it's like if you want to be like, if you want the chance to be well liked there, just try and like be understanding, and try and like at least seem like you're trying to learn the culture, like just the way of life or how they play even. So not saying I was like horrible in that, but it's just always like hindsight's 2020, I guess.
Looking at some of the content that you were posting on the Players Network, like I really was fascinated when you spoke about this specific idea, and just kind of reading like the caption that you wrote about it, like as overseas players, it's a possibility for us that we don't really talk about. You hop from team to team, country to country, new dreams, new adventures, but when you're caught in that in between, like what do you do, right? You have we don't have the support of players unions, established leagues. Like we're working multiple jobs, staying on top of your training, sometimes on your own. Maybe you don't have a team to train with. It's a lonely place to be. And then, as you mentioned too, you start to see your friends, ex-teammates, it's one by one. Now they're off to Sweden. Now they're off to here, and you're still at home. And it's like kind of a lonely place, and you feel stuck like that.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely felt that so much. It's like that feeling of you come home and you speak to people outside of the game, and they're like, oh, like, what are you doing? And it's such a hard to answer, because you're like, yeah, I'm talking, I'm trying to figure things out. At the same time, you're like, coaching here and there. Maybe you're like driving Uber, like you're just trying to do whatever you can to just put money in your pocket so you're ready. And it's such a weird space to be in, and I haven't quite figured out how to navigate it.
No, it is so hard. And I think like what I found honestly the most helpful was like leaning on other people, like leaning on people that understood the space. I think it's really easy to, almost isolate yourself, and it's like that makes sense. Like you're disappointed, you wish you had a contract, you wish you had a team, but you don't. And the people that are going to understand and also be able to really be there for you and also maybe like help you get through it are going to be people that are in that space too. And it might be hard to like hear like about their successes and all that, but like at the end of the day, like their success is great and it has no effect on your success. It's only better if you're going to cheer them on, and also like maybe you can lean on them, and then at another time they can lean on you too. So I felt similarly to you, like what you were talking about, like people are asking like, oh, like what's going on? And like you try and explain, but like it is tiring explaining like something that feels like a failure in the moment to people that don't totally understand the space that you're in. And that's not to say that they don't care. Like, of course they care. They're your friends and your family, but they might not totally understand. And that is draining, and you're already drained all like from the experience itself. So
Yeah.
I found leaning on people that were playing abroad, or were playing professionally was something that really helped get me through. And it takes a little bit of mental strength in the moment, but I think it was definitely worth it because it keeps you motivated and it keeps you like just hungry like for more, you know.
Yeah, just to maybe provide a little context for players who are going overseas to a new opportunity and maybe expect a certain level of professionalism, and then sometimes they get there and it doesn't quite look like that. Is there anything that you can kind of say regarding, I know you've mentioned maybe certain things with upper management, and I mean, there's definitely things I could talk about places that I've played as well, where you're just looking around, going, what's happening?
Yeah.
But I don't know. You can take this however you want to. Like I said, I don't want to put you in a tough spot, but just I'm sure players out there who are trying to go to Europe for the first time maybe would look for some insight into it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think the biggest thing is like, regardless of my experiences at whatever clubs or universities I've been at, the people that will only really understand are the people that lived it with me. So I try to be a bit more I don't know, secretive about it, because at the end of the day, like, these teams still did give me an opportunity, and like, I don't want to bash them for anything. It's between the club and myself, for sure. But yeah, definitely when you're going overseas, like, I think this is the biggest thing. The US is like very good at marketing. So that's the difference. Like, you see like the USL one here, you see the USL championship, even the MLS, like the amount of marketing and stuff, like the money in the US is ridiculous. Like, if a team in the first division in Finland had the money that like a USL one team had, or some of the USL one teams, they would probably be like at least in Europa League or Champions League every year. Like, that's the difference. But that's just not the case. So what I will say is it's going to be a huge culture shock, because unless if you're going to like a club in a first division in like a top 5 league, it's not going to be very glamorous. Like, they might not even have like an Instagram page, which is fine. Like, that's not why you're doing it. But I think that people kind of underestimate like how, like, I don't want to say like poor, but like how much like less funded it is at these levels that are really good. Like, I know in Portugal, like, there's not much money, but like, you have some very, very good players not getting paid anything, and like, the league is tough, like in the third division, even in the first division, I know. So yeah, like, there's definitely a bit of a culture shock in that sense. Like, I always look at it this way too, is like, if sometimes I'm fortunate that I didn't play at like a big university, because I don't know, like, not many players are able to actually top that experience. Like, if you go, let's say you go to Clemson, and then you don't get drafted to the MLS or the championship, or maybe even the USL one, and you have to go overseas somewhere to a lower division. Like, the amount of stuff you get in comparison, like from Clemson to, like, let's say the club that I went to, like, it would be like, it would blow your mind. Like, you would just be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, because you've had the best already. So it's like, how much harder is it? It's kind of the same concept of like when you're in a youth academy in England. Maybe you're with Chelsea at the under 18s, and then you don't sign for Chelsea, and you have to go on loan to like a fourth division club, and it's like, it's not even a fraction of what you would have normally. And also at the same time too, like, people from that country are in that league, like, fighting to, feed their families, fighting to get promoted. Like, everybody wants it. So it's not just, just like people playing anymore because of the promotion relegation. Like, when you have promotion relegation, like, you have just as much positive as negative. So you have that percentage to go up, whether your team goes up or you go up as a player, or you have the chance that you go down too. So
what is the world, And it's funny, when I was getting my hair cut a couple weeks ago, like, the barber asked me, was like, I was telling him about what I did, I was just in Australia and playing, and like, isn't it, and they go, isn't it just great to do what you love? And I talked to my buddy Luke about this when I was visiting him a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I processed that question, and my first response wanted to be like, how much time you got? Because like,
yeah,
that's a like
it's
that's
a loaded question.
That's a loaded question. Because like, yeah, there's times where I've loved it, but like, you know, like there's times where I've hated it. There's times where all the people who I've interviewed on it have probably hated it, whether they would choose to admit it or not. And there's, you know, a lot of the 90% of these players that I've had on this show as well, and myself included, like, we're also not making enough as players to actually like just live and be humans.
Yeah.
So all of us are coming home and coaching, or coaching in the, you know, during the season, or we're doing a different job, or we've started our own business. So like, that's part of it too. It is like, you may actually just love the idea of football so much and just getting to play it, and that's your thing. That may be enough for you. But the reality is like, some of us play for 10, 12 years and we never fully get just that. Or it takes you so long to get to that, or you know what I mean? So yeah, it's an interesting point in like how much, especially when it becomes a profession for you, like how much does it still, how much weight does it still carry in your life, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's very interesting. It's like the concept of whenever like movie stars or celebrities have any sort of like complaint, there's always that group of people that are like, oh, what are they complaining about? They live the dream.
Yeah.
They're just ungrateful. And it's like, no, like there's still some, like, you don't want to look into it, but there's still some like downsides of being famous, being a singer, whatever, going on tour.
Yeah.
Which, like you're saying, people like still want to believe that there is a dream job and there is a perfect, I love it and I'm so happy and I love every second.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's partially too, because like you said, they don't want to hear someone who they deem to, you know, kind of have quote unquote a better life than them complain.
Yeah.
Right. Like they just don't want to. And I, you know, I've been very aware of that, and I've spoken about it on this show too. I'm like, I understand that like people don't, in a sense, want to hear about like our kind of like struggles, because one, we chose this, so I get that, and two, it's like, you know, people are like, well, you know, you kick a ball, like how hard can it really be? So I get that, and I'm cognizant of that, but I think like, I don't know, whether it's music, whether it's art, movies, athletics, like any of these kind of like dream professions, like we're not asking you to necessarily have sympathy, but like empathy kind of goes a long way, like regardless of. All right, that's it. That's a wrap for 2023. I know we're a couple weeks into 2024 now, but that's all right. Wanted to make sure that you guys got to get this episode in and recap all of the best moments from 2023. First things first, if you liked any of those stories that you just heard, make sure that you go back and check the catalog to see the full episode of the story that you really liked, or whether you want to watch it on YouTube or stream it on whatever audio platform you are currently using. Go ahead and do that. While you're there, make sure that you are already subscribed. If you're already subscribed, great. Follow along, leave a comment, leave a like, leave a rating and review, whatever platform you are on. Make sure that you interact and engage with the show in some way. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Last but not least, I did mention at the top there, if you are interested in something kind of like an advisory call or consultant type call when it comes to this crazy world that is professional football, get in touch with me in some way. I have my email in the 11pod at gmail.com. There's also the Instagram page in the 11pod, TikTok in the 11pod, all the socials. You know, if you're watching on YouTube, even leave a comment. I'd really be curious to see if people are interested in that, and would love to kind of get something like that started in 2024. So that's it. That's a wrap on 23. I'll take a break for a little while, enjoy the time away from my voice, and I'll catch you soon in 24. All right? Peace.